We take a closer look at Taiwan, which de facto operates as an independent country, but is not diplomatically recognized by most other countries around the world. That makes its few diplomatic relations extra important, especially because Beijing has been on overdrive to pick off Taiwan's allies one by one in recent years and get them to switch recognition in the attempt to isolate the island. This week, Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei visited Taipei. He was received by Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen with full military honors and a state banquet. Giammattei told Tsai not to worry and that his country would stand with Taiwan.
Guatemala supports Taiwan's diplomatic objectives, which are aggressively securing national sovereignty and protecting the entirety of the territory, promoting peace and taking part in international society as a sovereign country.
China protested the Guatemalan president's visit to Taipei, of course, and Beijing is watching another country in the Central and South American region, Paraguay. The country is holding elections in just a few days, and the results could determine whether Taiwan will lose yet another diplomatic ally. This would be a foreign policy setback, but there is also a human cost. DW's Cha Chun-ye reports.
Pablo is one of the few tangible signs of the friendship between Taiwan and Paraguay. He's doing a PhD in Asia-Pacific Studies here in Taipei. But today, he's focused on what's happening at home. The opposition party in Paraguay wants to cut ties with Taiwan and switch allegiance to China.
Because I am in my third year already in my major. So it's like a lot of time that I've invested here and a lot of effort, and I would not like to lose it all because of in the event that Paraguay and Taiwan break their diplomatic ties.
Most Paraguayan students here receive a scholarship from the Taiwanese government. If the opposition wins the election there on 30th April and breaks ties with Taiwan, they all may have to go back.
I think that me personally and most of our students, we are afraid that we could go through the same path that Honduras took.
It was only last month that Honduras changed sides, officially recognizing China and cutting diplomatic relations with Taiwan. That left Taiwan with just 13 sovereign states as official allies. None of these places have major global influence. If Paraguay also switches to China, they will leave Taiwan with only 12 diplomatic allies left, and none at all in South America. Guo Weigong is an expert in Latin American studies from Taiwan's Tamkang University. He said the 65-year-old diplomatic friendship with Paraguay could fall victim to economic considerations.
Paraguay is a major exporter of soybeans and beef. They've wanted to enter the Chinese market for a long time, but the trade of agricultural products is very delicate and strict. And if you don't have diplomatic relations and no signed agreements on quarantine, you probably cannot export to mainland China.
Taiwan's officials say they will not try to compete with what they call China's dollar diplomacy. They say they are confident Paraguay will remain an ally. Guo Weigong warns that Taiwan must not become numb to losing allies, that each loss, no matter how small, is important.
Taiwan says we are a sovereign and independent country, but if no one recognizes you, you're just talking to yourself.
People here in Taiwan should pay attention, says Gong. He says the more diplomatically isolated the island becomes, the more vulnerable they will be to aggression from China.
Joining us in the studio is DW's Clifford Coonan, formerly based in Beijing. Clifford, it seems a bit crazy that events all the way across the Pacific could impact Taiwan and, in turn, regional security in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, it is a bit crazy. I think, when you go to visit Taiwan, you see these flags, in front of the foreign ministry and the presidential palace, and they're for places like Eswatini, Tuvalu, Palau, Vatican City. These are some of the smallest countries in the world, and clearly, no disrespect to the countries, obviously, but they're not of major geopolitical importance. So Taiwan's clinging to these countries in some ways is quite surreal in a way. And it highlights, I think, just how fragile Taiwan's position is, because it's being squeezed out of every international arena by Beijing, which wants to reduce its influence to as little as possible. Excuse me. And so they're trying to isolate them on the global stage, but they're also, the United States at the same time is trying to shore up its security standing. So it's in a very difficult position.
But do diplomatic relations actually matter? When you look at Taiwan's economy, it's usually in the top 20 largest economies in the world. So it seems to be doing okay without.
Well, I think so. I think that's it. I mean, whatever about the diplomatic ties, the thing is, Taiwan's most important partner is a country with which it doesn't have diplomatic ties, which is the United States.
That's the irony.
Right? And so when it has that, it can basically, it allows Taiwan to punch above its weight. Economically, as you pointed out, it's a very rich country. It's supplying a huge amount of microchips now, which makes it strategically important and a global player on that, something which is of a major irritation to Beijing, which is struggling to keep up in the innovation sphere and in the technological sphere when it comes to microchips. So I think it's basically flourished under these American security guarantees and under America's protection.
I mean, China's endgame ultimately, like, what if we're in a situation where Taiwan is left with one diplomatic ally or zero? What happens then?
I think there's been a couple of theories about this. One is that we're going to start looking at something called dual recognition, where countries can recognize both China and Taiwan. It's unlikely, though, that China will go for that. I think what Taiwan is going to do now is start to try and focus more on international organizations, on keeping its profile high without going the traditional route of diplomacy. The traditional diplomatic route is closed off, so it has to look at alternatives. Beijing has squeezed it out of things like the International Olympic Committee. It's not on the WHO, which we saw during the pandemic, that the fact that it wasn't in the World Health Organization was a problem. And Taiwan reminded people of that. And I think what it's going to do is start looking to boost its reputation internationally, and really, but through less traditional channels, because ultimately that will help it maintain this. Because as we know, I mean, as we mentioned, the economy is strong, it has a lot to offer, and it needs to keep its profile high, because recent geopolitical events have seen Taiwan come under a lot of pressure. We had the visit by Nancy Pelosi, which saw the island basically being, there was a patrol around the island, and we have issues like possible economic blockade. So it really does need to keep its profile high in order that people don't forget that Taiwan is still there and that it needs assistance.
Very quickly, any predictions for the next country China might target after Paraguay?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think Eswatini, given that it's the last African state, it would sort of, maybe if there was pressure put there, could be something that Beijing seeks to try and close down. But I think Beijing is just going to keep focusing on all of them until it eventually isolates Taiwan diplomatically.
Clifford Coonan, thank you so much for joining us, as always.